So I think we're live. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our session on how to successfully structure biopharma operations in Europe. So I'm Thomas Nimmerger. I'm Manager International Markets at Basel Area Business Innovation, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. And we have a great panel of speakers. If we move to the next slide, my colleague Anke Hollnagel will briefly set the scene and give a quick introduction about the Basel area. And we will then have our colleagues from Deloitte, Carlo Veri, Daniel Stutzmann, and Martin Blanke, giving us insights on global trends, also aspects on taxes and supply chain. And we'll then hand over to Mark Davis from Negotium Bio, who will give us some insights on how to partner with supply chain partners in Europe or globally generally. And he will be covering for Christoph Becker, who was originally on our speaker list, but unfortunately can't make it today. And then we will have Michael Peterson from Lonza giving us some insights on why it actually is a good idea to partner with CDMOs. And following this, we will have a Q&A session. And for this Q&A session, if you look at the right-hand side of your screen on the pane, there is a tab that's called Event. And there you will see a button that's called Q&A. And if you have any questions that come up during those input talks, it will take about 30 minutes. Please put them in there. And additionally, there are already questions in this panel, which you can upvote. So this kind of gives us an indication on what kind of topics you're interested that we can pick up in the Q&A session. So please use this again to upvote the questions you're interested in and post yours for other people to upvote as well. And if you have any technical questions or comments, please use the chat functions. There's a chat button as well. Yes, and after the Q&A session, I mean, all of this should take us about 45 minutes. We will then also enable the networking session. And with this, I actually want to hand over already to my colleague Anke to set the scene and give you insights on the Basel area.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Thomas, for the introduction and the overview. And yeah, I would like to take the opportunity and introduce Basel area. So who are we at Basel area? We are the go-to service agency for startups, institutions, and companies who are looking for business success in the Basel area, and we work mainly on two areas. One is the business and the investment promotion, which is where Thomas and I work. We help international companies to come to Basel area. And then we have colleagues at the innovation promotion side, and they really look after the local ecosystem of innovators and entrepreneurs and help and promote that. We are a non-profit organization funded by the local governments. There are industry experts working at Basel area. Currently, it's 35 associates, and we have representatives in China, Korea, the US, India, and Germany covering Europe. We have a very powerful network of corporates, academia, innovators, entrepreneurs, so we can help actually and have an impact for international companies coming here, but also for the local ecosystem. And luckily, we have senior industry representatives in our executive leadership team. The Basel area is really a life science giant in Europe. There are more than 700 life science companies here. I'm sure you know the companies like Novartis and Roche, Actelion now belonging to Johnson & Johnson. There are other international companies here like Moderna, Beijing, Hengrui, Dr. Reddy's, Roivant, you name them. With mid-sized companies and also a very vibrant biotech startup scene. And on the Swiss side, we have also great universities like the University of Basel, the ETH, and the University of Zurich are also not far away. And due to the proximity to the border with France and Germany, it's also not far to universities like Strasbourg in France or the University of Freiburg in Germany. We have more than 1,000 research groups here in Basel area. They work, of course, a lot at the University of Basel and the University Hospital. There's also research done, of course, at the University of Applied Science, but there are also very well-known research institutes like the Friedrich Mischer Institute, the Paul Scherrer Institute, or the Swiss Tropical and Public Health Institute here in Basel area. And the ETH has also its Department for Biosystems Science and Engineering here in the Basel area. We have a talent pool of more than 31,000 talents in life science here in Basel. This is really a lot, especially if you compare it to London, Paris, or Munich. This talent pool covers the entire value chain. Here you can find talent in research, in drug development, clinical trial management, in manufacturing, and also commercialization. So with this broad span of talent, the great academic landscape, and the industry presence, you have additionally availability to funding and a regulatory and business environment that is very, very friendly to business. And I think you can tell I can go on and on talking about Basel area, but that's not the topic of today's event. So for now, I pause. I say thank you, and I hand over to our friends from Deloitte.
Yes, thank you so much, Anke. So we're now waiting for Carlo, Daniel, and Martin to come onto the stage. Oh, hi, Daniel. Hi, Martin. And we're waiting for everyone. Carlo to join us as well.
Absolutely. So in the meantime, also a warm welcome from our side. Just quick introduction. My name is Danny Stutzman. I'm a tax partner, so obviously I will cover the tax part. Martin is director in our regulatory group. He will mainly really outline requirements to be considered and from a supply chain perspective in relation to regulatory. And we have Carlo from our consulting practice, who actually is dealing with the slides. And so we all hope that he comes up online shortly. So we have the presentation.
Did we lose Carlo now? Daniel, do you have the presentation as well? Would be able to share it?
I'm not sure, but I can check. Give me 1 minute. But Carlo should be back any minute as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's no webinar session without the technical glitch, isn't it? Otherwise, I can try to share my screen. I have your PDF as well. It seems we have lost Carlos in the cyberspace.
Carlo is in the waiting room, apparently. They need to let him in.
Carlo, if you can click share audio and video.
So he pushed apparently share audio and video, but there's no button anymore.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Because then we could go on without him, if that is possible. Daniel, are you able to cover Carlos' part as well? Then I can move us through the slides.
I will certainly give my best. So, well then, let's start here with the slides. Essentially, here what you see, what was already quickly outlined before, it just highlights the highlights about Switzerland in general. So most of you know that Switzerland has been ranked as the #1 in the Global Innovation Index for years. I think that's up for more than 10 years already. We outline here Switzerland is really known for its talent, highly skilled talents in the life science area. And when we talk to clients that want to set up operations in Europe or Switzerland, they obviously always come to us and say, yeah, we get the best talent in Switzerland, in particular from a commercial side, but also from a research and development. So Switzerland is indeed very attractive here. And not only here is it the education system, but also quality of life, which makes it very attractive, in particular in the Basel area, to attract new clients here. I think what is very important from a supply chain and life science network, Switzerland is not part of the EU, but we have free trade agreements with the EU and over 40 countries. Essentially, we have many bilateral agreements, and that helps us really also operating in the biopharma and the medtech area, more or less burdenless in Europe, essentially. From a regulatory perspective, I think Martin, you will cover that in detail later. What we see here, we are integrated into the EU regulation. However, there are certain aspects to be considered in detail when we have a Swiss entity that wants to sell products into the EU, and there are certain requirements and licenses to be obtained. Generally speaking, here, obviously, authorities in Switzerland are very good, proactive, and so we've been approved as the #1 national authority, and clearly short contact to business authorities, essentially. And obviously now that's main part what we see here in Switzerland, very stable from a tax perspective, very attractive framework. It's OECD conform, but still, I think one of the most attractive ones within Europe, if not worldwide, essentially. And also, in addition to the promotion of R&D performed in Switzerland in the form of R&D super deduction or a patent box, there's also in certain areas the possibility to obtain tax holidays for new investments, and that helps really reducing the overall tax burden. But I now see that Carlo has joined, and hand over the word to Carlo.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and apologies that some technical issue might have happened, unfortunately. I can share the presentation, or we can proceed with this one. It's actually the same.
I can move you through the slides.
Yeah, sure. So moving to if we move to the following slide, what we see essentially we do see some trade-offs, like when setting up operations in Switzerland and also in Basel. So primarily on 5 key elements. From a launch perspective, there are two different ways to do that, like, either selecting the core markets, in consideration of international reference pricing, or really prioritizing the largest market based on its speed and reimbursement timeline. When it comes to the, how we managing the European business, there are, trade-offs between having a lean structure and leveraging some of the home market capabilities versus having, a fully fledged European headquarter, and then, establishing affiliates in the different local markets. From a tax standpoint, there are also trade-offs in the senses, like, where to locate the profits and how to optimize the tax structure, going from either, remaining in the home market, or maximizing what is, let's say, long-term tax benefits, where to locate the IP. From a supply chain standpoint, defining the optimal model, there are two kind of extremes. On one end, there's an extensive build, setting up the relevant legal entity and licensing all core markets, versus a light model where there is a leverage of the EU hub to serve the different customers. And then last but not least, from an IT perspective, which is often one of the key decisions that companies need to take because it implies a big investment, there is either a minimum, what we say, a minimum viable product, an MVP, and then start and build gradually the whole infrastructure, or versus evaluating and building the different infrastructure on all the markets. So typically what we have seen is over the first few years, there is an investment which is required to set up the European operation, which ranges between 60 to 150 million euros. So in the interest of time, I would move to the next slide, where we actually outline three major archetypes when it comes to scale up. We have one archetype, which is more what we say end-to-end, and is focusing primarily on the commercialization of the product. And then we do have two other archetypes, which are more R&D focused. From on the left side, you see here the end-to-end kind of model. It's typically type of model where you have, if you compare the IPO versus the maturity level, you want to push the big asset or the blockbuster towards in market and from the beginning to the end, and you also push toward licensing. If we look at the R&D models, it's more about, it's caring less about the commercialization, but rather focusing on the developing the assets in more or less therapeutic areas. Now, the difference between the two R&D models, it's primarily because what you have, the focus R&D model, it's as a less therapeutic area and more trying to develop the limited number of assets. The diversify R&D is more try to build a platform of technology, so you can really scale all the assets that you have started to develop, also across multiple therapeutic years. And that's exactly what you see highlighted here on the slides that we have. Let me hand over to Martin, who will walk us through the supply chain.
Thank you, Carlo. Looking at the supply chain for Switzerland, what we have is it's one of the major hubs for active substances being produced in the world. So with Lonza in Basel, we have one of the main manufacturers of these. And with that, there is also a highly skilled workforce in research and development to invent new therapies and new active molecules to support healthcare throughout the world. We have a very experienced workforce, not only in terms of running a pharma business, but also especially in running a pharma manufacturing business, meaning that you have people with knowledge in all the different skills that you need for being able to manufacture and also to control manufacturing by these contract manufacturing organizations that are working for you. If you look at the supply chain, we have a location in Basel. It's right in the middle of Europe. We have two of the big countries neighboring to us, France and Germany. So it's very well connected, and that also plays on the language side. So in Basel, I would say English, German, and French are just common languages that are very well represented. There is a very special link between Switzerland and the European Union in terms of manufacturing of medicinal products, because we have a mutual recognition agreement in place between both, and this aligns Switzerland to the regulations of the EU. It's very special because the Swiss pharmaceutical licenses are not really in line with the European licenses, but they're trying to align them now. And Switzerland is now part of the European National Competent Authority Network. So you can find the Swiss licenses in the European database for manufacturing licenses already. The wholesaler distribution authorizations will be coming later. And there is something that only exists in Switzerland, and that is the trade abroad license. You can have a pharmaceutical business owning medicinal products operating in Switzerland that does only trade in other countries, not putting these products into Switzerland. That is a very special license, and it's a basic license that allows you to become operational as a pharma company without actually putting something on the Swiss market. If you look at the Switzerland EU integration, that is something very critical in terms of that there are many changes going on throughout the last month, I have to say. There is this famous EU GMP Annex 21. That is the GMP Annex discussing importation. And there was a lot of ado around, is a Swiss company allowed to sell directly into Europe? So sell to other European countries being outside, with Switzerland being outside of the European Union. The draft was published last year. We are waiting for the final version of this annex, but it turns out that there is a way that the Swiss are considered to be part of the European Union in terms of manufacturing and supplying medicinal products. And it also introduces a way of selling from a Swiss entity directly into the big European markets. There are a couple of markets that are still waiting for more details on this, so they're a little hesitant about it, but the big European markets, so Germany, France, Italy, and Spain, they accept now that the Swiss can sell directly to them. And this means that you don't have to formally re-import the products into the country. You can just do a normal sell as you would do from an EU company to another EU company. The Swiss quality standards are recognized by EU GMP regulations. That is also something very advantageous. And with the integration into European licensing standards, we expect that this will even develop further so that Switzerland will be a fully equal and recognized partner to the other EU national competent authorities in dealing with setting the supply chain regulations for Europe. Okay, Carlo?
Yeah, I think Daniel.
Yes, so what you see on this slide here is essentially a structuring example that aligns tax efficiency with regulatory requirements. So most of you, I would expect, are familiar with such a supply chain structure. So what you essentially see here is we have a Swiss principal. The Swiss principal owns all valuable intangibles, is really responsible for the business processes, the overall strategy for the markets it's responsible for, and it manages and bears all the risk. The products essentially are derived by low risk manufacturers, could be contract or toll manufacturing, and sold via distributors that also act as limited risk distributors. What we can achieve by doing structuring like this is essentially that the low risk manufacturers and distributors only have a low taxable residual profit that is attributable to these operations, and the remaining profit is essentially taxed in Switzerland. And by doing that, one can really benefit from the low effective income tax rate. So for example, here in the Basel area, it's between 13 and 14%. So very attractive and can create additional shareholder value. What you see here also in this example, which may be a little bit special, Switzerland is selling through a European logistics company, and that is essentially picking up on the point Martin just mentioned. Here, the European logistics company has a market authorization as well as the import authorization, and essentially it allows to sell in all the market on via the European logistics company, so that we don't have to worry around Annex 21 in certain jurisdictions that have certain concerns if a non-EU entity sells into the jurisdiction. So in the interest of time, I think we can continue.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel, Martin, and Carlo. I think the cyber gods are not super happy with us today because we lost Mark in our backstage cyber room currently. So I think we're gonna try to get on Michael Patterson from Lonza first. Oh wait, no, we have Mark, I think.
Hi.
Hi, Mark.
Hi.
Brilliant. Good to find you again. I thought we lost you in cyberspace.
No worries. I was found.
Brilliant. So please go ahead. You're free to share your presentation, and we can move on and learn all about on how to partner with CDMOs.
Yeah, no worries. So thanks to everybody. Can you, Thomas, can you see the presentation okay?
I can see it. If you can move into presentation mode, then we would be able to see it even better.
Are you there? Everything's working okay?
We can see it. If you can move it into presentation mode, we would be able to see it even better.
I thought it was in presentation mode. Okay. Apologies. It's going to do it a bit differently. Okay. How's that?
Very good. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. And my name is Mark Davis. I'm filling in for Christoph Becker. He was unable to make it today, had a bit of an emergency, but he's fine and recovering. I'm a partner at Negodium Bio. We're a firm that's based both in Basel and Boston, Massachusetts, and we work with small to emerging biotechs with technical outsourcing. So this is a short presentation to talk about trends and best practices in outsourcing for manufacturing. The first slide here is when we're really thinking about chemistry and manufacturing control solutions for an emerging biotech. There's really three basic models for how biotechs might want to structure their CMC development, teams or operations. The first structure is really more of a traditional in-house structure, where everything is self-contained. So usually this is kind of more the case. I think you're finding the trends in the industries to moving toward more of a semi-internal, but historically a big pharma type setup was more of an in-house setup because the available resources were there, and there was enough volume, if you would, in development programs to justify in-house expertise. So the advantages of in-house expertise are really around full control and oversight as to what's going on in the development process. Maintenance of in-house knowledge bases. So you're able to keep your intellectual property a little bit under more control. The downsides are really what we say high impermanent costs. It's when you're hiring employees, you end up having a fixed cost basis. That's more. It's very much more of a long-term commitment. We like to argue actually there's less access to best practice. It's not because of the talent of your team. It's simply because your team is focused very much on their development project and moving your program forward, and less so having bandwidth to understand what's going on broadly outside of your company in the sector itself, which leads us more to a semi-internal type model, where there's a higher degree of control and oversight. There's a gaining of knowledge because you are interacting with companies who do provide services. And again, I think this is more what we're seeing even in big pharma as far as trends, is having a semi-internal team to where you've outsourced certain key things and specialties. And that way, there's still you're gaining that knowledge from the specialists as they interact with different clients. And then when we really look at it, there's a high degree of maintenance and coordination, trying to maintain those supply relationships and also trying to maintain it in alignment with your own internal goals. And we sometimes argue it's resource intensive because there's multiple connections in the communication chain. The last model is a fully outsourced model. So some people call that virtual pharma. We believe that provides a lot more access to best practice. It's just because the interaction of the teams typically are more focused on around. There's multiple clients, so they get to see what each company and each goals are doing in a faster pace than they would having, say, an in-house model where you only focus on your in-house practice. We believe that it's a way to mitigate cost to risk mitigation because you can have multiple parties, but at the same time, we say it brings you more to a variable cost model. So because it's on demand, so you use it as you need to, but then you can cut it back when you need to cut it back, so you can control your cash flow better. We do say it's limited control because most of these are independent contractor relationships. So you're very much depending on supplier relationship management to govern and to really push forward that the performance is where you need it to be, and also the level of expertise and the quality of the technical product. And you are depending on external expertise, which means you're not necessarily building it in-house. But these are pretty much three basic models when it comes to CMC outsourcing. Common risk when you're looking to outsource is, for us, our number one is really helping our clients understand where they are from a freedom to operate perspective. So how much of your program or how much of your product is depending on external intellectual property? What is your market access? So, limited market access, meaning, what types of investors are willing to help you really achieve or really get to a point where this IP can be commercialized. We also see a lot in the transactions we support a high secondary cost that's oftentimes overlooked, because if you're engaging, say, with a contract manufacturer and they're reliant or they're offering you an in-house technology and you haven't thought through what the commercialization impacts are, you need to be thinking through what these licenses could cost you in order to have either freedom to operate or at least to be able to access that type of technology. So this is a secondary cost that should be considered. We call it a high secondary cost in that licensing. The other risk of choice is CDMO. One of the things we like to really look at is how do a CDMO interact with the client from a cultural perspective. There needs to be a match in values. There needs to be a match in goals. There needs to be a match in how the project teams will interact to help ensure success in a program. We also look at capacity constraints. Are they a very small R&D team? Do you need a large R&D team? What type of operations you need? It's all program dependent. And then also, obviously, I think everyone looks at quality and compliance history. You very much want a partner who understands CGMP and who understands what it takes to get on the market. But we find this to be a little bit more important when you're looking at pivotal trials versus when you're looking at proof of concept. And the last thing for us is really cost. What's the quality of the proposals you're receiving? Do you have any type of insight to any kind of hidden cost within, say, process development or raw materials that could be pass-throughs? And also to really, kind of help our clients understand, what's in the contracts itself. We understand that this is kind of where it comes back to choice of CDMO and the business model and how the two companies fit philosophically. So another thing to really look at is the types of terms in your contracts and how it ties into these other two elements, especially freedom to operate. When you're looking at an outsourcing process, I'll kind of go through this because this is pretty much textbook. But this is a typical outsourcing process for buying and selling almost anything you can think of. So, the first step is really looking at the requisition. This is your first engagement points. This helps you with your financial planning to understand, what type of money you could be spending from a budgetary perspective or phasing perspective. Oftentimes, especially if it's new, selections are really done sometimes based on internal team's experience. What we really recommend is that we actually open your mind to understand what's available in the market beyond our own experience. So we help our clients really understand what their options are from a broad sense, not just necessarily saying, okay, here's our favorite, or here's the one that we know. We don't always know each other or everything, and at the same time, we also understand that the market's constantly evolving. Then there's an evaluation stage, and then obviously once you've gotten to the evaluation stage, you kind of negotiate, which is where we come into contracts. And then there's the back end financial transaction management. So we've described this kind of as a cycle. And the reason why you see contract management and so transaction management really kind of flowing back into supplier relationship management, because, this is an energy intensive process where, your selections, you're hoping you only need to make them once and you find a great partner, and that partnership works over time. So that's why we often see this as a cycle, because as new needs from a company come to fruition, you might actually find that just back in your spend planning phase into your current relationships versus having to identify needs every single time. So just as a simplified version, this is what we call an outsourcing process. Really think these three boxes in the middle are more strategic. So the other two ends, which are more tactical and financial. So really when we're thinking, what are the practical steps, next, whenever we need to say a CDMO identified, the first step is, like I said, is really who provides these CMC solutions. We always recommend that, you do consider your past experience, but at the same time, you really open up and figure out, what are my options? What don't I know? And that's really step one. So, easiest sources, obviously, our internet, but we also select external resources. So these are trade shows, oftentimes. CPHI, there's a show coming up in Vienna for cell therapy manufacturing. These types of shows are a place where you can not only network, but also shows where you can figure out what's new on the market. So oftentimes, while you go to these trade shows to meet with people that you already know, I like to spend at least half the time trying to meet people I don't know. The next step is really figuring out, what does it look like? How does it cost? This is very procurement vernacular. We call it an RFX process, but RFI, RFP, RFQ. Really, the RFP, RFQ, RFB are the same thing. The RFI is really, for us, is developing a profile of a company that meets our clients' needs. So profile of the company so that you understand how it fits your present needs and your future needs. Once you kind of have gone through that process and you do have, say, a quote, you need to look at what type of relationship is it? Is this like a one-off or something that's relatively low risk? Then if that's the case, purchase orders are probably sufficient. Or do I need, a broader contract? Say, for example, if you're outsourcing a full monoclonal antibody or a small molecule drug, you definitely want a contract. And also looking at your CDMO, it all depends. I think if you're a bit early phase and proof of concept, you're probably looking at a one-off tactical type relationship, because your goal is really just to prove that your drug's going to work, how you promise your investors it works. After that, you want to start thinking a little bit more strategic into commercialization. And that's where we kind of say it depends on the situation. Is this a tactical or strategic relationship? And then also, how do we measure performance? And that builds into a contract. So now that you say have a contract, how do I manage that relationship? Obvious, who are the key parties? Who are they talking to? We like to recommend that you actually whittle it down to one key party and one message for each company. This really helps head off confusion, heads off conflict. And then also, if you can, it depends if the relationship is tactical or strategic, whether or not you establish a joint steering committee. And then also kind of like plot out the future. What happens next? Where do you go in this relationship? And what does success look like? And also, how can you kind of send your customers, or your CDMO or your outsourcing partner, thank you for successful projects? So, helping them a bit by giving them a recommendation or a post or saying thank you. Say, hey, great, Lonza did a wonderful job for me. But in order to do that, we recommend to make sure that you define what does success look like. When we look at risk, one of the things that we kind of look at our clients, because we typically work with smaller biotech, first question is, do I matter? So if you're a one-off project going to a very large company, your revenue to that company in the greater scheme of things and the greater revenue pool may be very small. So this is kind of a question is, how do I matter? Why is my project important to them? Also other things to look at, as we pointed out, what's their quality track record, culture, they're proactive, really pay close attention early on to your engagements to see how responsive, say, their quality or the technical teams are to you, in conjunction with their sales teams who's actually trying to get your business. So you want to see kind of how they react to you, and are they proactive? Ask for, what have you innovated? What problems have you solved? What's your track record? This is really, I think, key to you. And as we said, business attitude. We always recommend competitive markets, because we do believe that no matter what segment you're in pharma, there are multiple options. There are multiple options in Europe and the US. And you should keep your eyes open to that. And then when we look at contractual conditions, how we recommend to our clients really think about freedom to operate strategy. And it's not because we're saying you want to switch and rebid every single time. We really would hope you don't need to. And performance and relationship are there, and that's even worth a premium, to be honest with you. But you want to understand what your conditions are, because a lot of times when you don't have this freedom to operate, you find yourself in a very tricky situation down as you get closer to commercialization. And as we said, really emphasize what's your relationship management strategy. How easy is it to work with people? Have you set up a governance structure? How do you adapt to changes? We call this oftentimes change controls, but because it's development, no program ever goes the way that you intend it to. So as an example, where we think about this as a cycle and a process, really looking at knowledge method transfer as a choice of CDMO, who is best for that? How much knowledge do they have? How much knowledge do you need to give them? In process development, who owns intellectual property? Are you basing it upon their platform or your platform? How are you measuring success in process development? Usually the next step in this process are really demonstration. You also want to look at raw material procurement. Where are they buying materials, and are they being competitive for your bid? In other words, are you able to see benefits from perhaps there are larger price volumes or something on the market, and who owns what as far as materials go? How do you set up your GMP manufacturing? Do you need slot reservations? Do you need, how do you manage process performance? How do you manage changes in economic conditions, especially in COVID times? QA release, warranties on the products, liabilities do they have? If they mess up, if they're negligent, your partner, and you provided them materials, who's liable for that? Something that you need to think about. Once again, it just kind of moves into a cycle until the next time you need to make a drug. Finally, we look at like strategic outsourcing options. We really see this into three buckets. Option one is kind of the more traditionalist. You hire a team, sometimes specialists. In a procurement vernacular, we call this category manager. They typically a dedicated resource in your team, so they're committed to you as like an employee, for example. They convey the greatest know-how transfer routes potential. So as they learn in your company, they're in your company, they're part of your team. But we oftentimes see this as kind of a lower return of investment, especially when you don't have a whole lot for that person to do. So if you only have a 1 or 2 program pipeline, sometimes it doesn't make sense to hire a specialist for that, but more of a generalist. Option 2 is really to hire teams of consultants on time demand. As we mentioned, we find greater market insights because of the portfolio effect of having multiple clients. There's lower overall cost, there's less legal risk, usually because there's a very fixed and defined contract. Costs are variable. Downsides is they may not only be dedicated to you, and it also depends on how these people interact with you. Do you find that there's a degree of knowledge transfer or not? I would certainly hope so. When you're working with a party that doesn't mind sharing how they do things, what they know, and to kind of teach your team. Option 3 is really you could generate, it's like option 2, but really looking at it broader. Do you generate an ad interim organization to kind of like bring certain talent that's recognized within your organization up to speed? We find there to be some benefits in this. But these are really just 3, I think we find options in developing strategic outsourcing for your organization. So thank you very much. And it's our pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you, Mark, for your elaborate explanations in your presentation. So we're now trying to get Michael Patterson from Lonza on the stage.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening.
Michael, good to have you here.
Hello, my name is Michael Peterson. I am heading the commercial development at Lonza's Drug Product Services business. And I have a presentation. Can you see that?
Not yet.
That should be better. Huh? Can you see it now?
Brilliant. Thank you.
I think we have just heard about all the complexities that the CMC part and to set up a supply chain for a modern therapeutic product involves. On the other side, there is also the siting decision. Obviously, as the colleagues from Deloitte have explained, there are a lot of things to take into account. And then you have the complexities of all these things, and at the same time you want to focus on marketing your product actually, which is another dimension. In my brief presentation, I want to show you how a full service partner can support you by taking on some of the complexities. And as Mark explained, experience is quite helpful. And we at Lonza, we are, for example, working on way more than 200 commercial molecules. So we know what it takes to bring a biological or a small molecule to the market. And this experience is basically available to customers. And here in Switzerland, obviously, there are many other CDMO organizations. So you can also take this as an illustration what the industry of in the country of our host here in Switzerland is capable of. Now, Switzerland is a good location for manufacturing. Switzerland is also a good location for managing these supply chains, as Mark just explained. The development of a biological drug or of a small molecule is quite complex, but new modalities are coming up, like, for example, cell and gene therapy. And also from the other end, also health ingredients are coming up, where suddenly nutrition products are associated also with a health claim, and they have their own complexity as well. And the advantages of outsourcing are obviously that you can always use the expertise of a company who is an expert in that field for the development, also for the manufacturing, etc. And this is not only true for the active ingredient itself, for example, a recombinant protein from mammalian cell culture or microbial fermentation, but could also be, for example, a bioconjugate, an ADC or a pegylated protein, or obviously one of the new modalities, which is now a very popular mRNA as a therapeutic agent, either for vaccination, but also for oncology. Very interesting products. With the advent of cell and gene therapy, of course, the complexities are further increasing. Viral vectors, cell therapy products, and also personalized medicines, where we really these cells from a patient are modified and then given to the patient as a therapy itself. All these things require additional expertise, which many biopharma companies do not have in-house. They have special expertise in research, for example, and then a CDMO can support them to industrialize this research, to industrialize it to really help patients worldwide. Lonza is active in all these areas. Lonza can also not only deliver these active ingredients, but can also produce parenteral drug products out of them or orally available drug products. All these things help our customers to gain speed, because our customers are typically in a race to the market or in a race into the clinic, depending on the development phase of the product. If you look at the value chain of the pharma and biotech industry, from discovery through the development and clinical development to the manufacturing distribution, especially the CMC part, which goes along with the clinical development and the commercial supplies, benefits significantly from a very strong partner, like, for example, Lonza. While the basic research is very often the core of the expertise of a biotech company, and also very often of a pharma company, or a large pharma company may also in-license molecules, typically support by an experienced partner can help to reduce the time to the clinic or to the market. This is, of course, not only true for the modalities with regard to the manufacturing of the new molecules themselves, like, for example, mRNA, but also for the pharmaceutical development. At the end of the day, we are not here to produce biochemically or chemically an active pharmaceutical ingredient. At the end of the day, I think we are all here to produce a pharmaceutical product to treat patients, to help patients in medical need. As mentioned earlier, Lonza can provide these services for biopharmaceuticals, mammalian and microbial proteins, bioconjugates, mRNA, cell and gene therapy, and small molecules for drug product and drug substance projects. And by offering all these services out of one hand, our customers benefit from accelerated timelines. Our customers don't need a buffer time to make sure that the drug substance is available right in time before the filling slot. Because if one project team is taking care of the complete timeline, it is not a responsibility and also not a liability of the customer to provide the material. The CDMO itself will do that, and the CDMO will use an integrated planning. On the other hand, there is also a risk reduction. If, for example, different companies would do the analytical testing of the product at the end, there's always the risk of different and misaligned specifications or misaligned analytical results. And while the drug substance may be pure at the drug substance stage, the drug product analytics may show that the purity is not good enough. And then suddenly a discussion and a debate can start, and it will be difficult for a company who's using different CDMOs for the drug substance manufacturing and the drug product manufacturing, to have a proper root cause investigation. What happened in between the delivery of the drug substance for drug product manufacturing? If one company is taking care of both ends of the development, the chemical or biotechnology production of the active pharmaceutical ingredient, and also the drug product manufacturing as an injectable or as an oral product or as a capsule or whatever, then this is the risk of the CDMO, who is overseeing the complete CMC value chain, the complete manufacturing. A company like Lonza has significant resources available to support our customers on a global base. And if you look at the list of these sites, it's the strategy behind that is not to be evenly spread over the globe. The strategy is to be close to our customers. We want to be close to our customers, and we want to be close to the markets of our customers, so that we help our customers where they need our support. And these can be small biotech startup companies. Many of them are nowadays also trying to bring their product to the market. We have biological products, for example, where a small biotech company is launching the product. We are doing all the process characterization for that, for the drug substance and drug product. And our customer only needs maybe one batch per year. That's fine, no problem. On the other hand, obviously, there is also large-scale capacity available at Lonza, as many of you may know. We're working with companies from all over the globe. You know, for us, China is not a new territory. We have many customers from China. We are present in China since nearly 20 years, and we are now also bringing mammalian cell culture to China, as you may have read in the press. And obviously, also the other markets are important, like US, like Europe. In Switzerland, Lonza is now setting up a new biopark, which is adding to our capacity. And the concept between this biopark, this picture here is a computer simulation with 5 manufacturing complexes. 2 of them have already been erected and are now taken into operations. The concept behind these manufacturing complexes is that we want to offer our customers the co-location of the active ingredient and the drug product manufacturing. And this can be chemical manufacturing, it can be biotechnology, it can be a sterile drug product manufacturing, lyophilization, prefilled syringes, whatever. And we also have a co-location of development, manufacturing, and testing at one site. So it's one project team which is delivering everything for our customers, from the idea to the commercial material. The sterile drug product can, for example, be manufactured in one line from the first GMP batch for early clinical trials through to commercial manufacturing. Obviously, everything is governed by one quality system. It's only one audit necessary, only one pre-approval inspection. It's one project team, one contract, one relationship. And that's basically Lonza's offering for customers who are suffering from the complexity and who want to focus really on developing innovative therapies by innovative science, and then want to have a reliable partner for the CMC part, for the manufacturing, and who at the end of the day afterwards want to focus on the marketing of the drug. The CMC part has a certain complexity in its own, but I think it's an established market to outsource these things. And if a partner who is offering everything out of one hand is involved, such a partner can obviously help to speed up things, because there is a lot of know-how available. And yeah, this know-how will not only help to speed up the development and the launch of the product, it will also help to de-risk the overall project. This brings me to the end of my presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Michael, for this insightful presentation. I think it's now, I mean, we're already a little over time, also thanks to our technical glitches that we had in the beginning. So apologies to everyone for that. But I think it's still time for a couple of questions, and maybe we can also get our colleagues from Deloitte on the stage as well. Hi, Carlo. And we have Daniel here and Martin. So, I mean, we don't have a lot of time, but I think it's worth going through a couple of questions, which I think are quite interesting. So one that was upvoted was kind of why should one have local affiliates in some EU markets and then some not? Kind of what is the strategic background to this?
Yeah. So I don't know if our colleague Martin is on stage, because otherwise I can start.
Yeah, please, Carlo, go.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I think we have, as mentioned actually before, we kind of have two types of model, and I think it's like to have like an extensive model. It helps like in a way, because like you kind of reduce like when you have a presence like broadly in quite a few markets, you have less political rigor risk of setting up local entities and licenses in the different local markets, and also you have the ability to tailor to specific market needs. You also, especially from a market access perspective, like you are closer to the payers, and you would be able to better manage like all the local negotiation in the different markets. On the other side, of course, like there is like from a cost perspective and investment perspective, like it's a bit more expensive in a way, and it's also it has a bit of higher risk in a way, because depending on like how each market sales in different markets will evolve, you are exposing an upfront investment which might be not ideal, depending on like how mature is the product. Of course, like if you prefer to have a lighter, I see also Martin, and happy for him to complement. Then one coming like to this kind of a lighter, what we define lighter model, definitely as an advantage of a leaner type of supply chain, and less investment required in the different markets. But on the contrary, you have much less control of the distribution, right? And also from a market access perspective, it's a bit more complicated. It's more difficult to manage the relationship with government and local authorities and payers. So that is something that it's kind of like both the pros and cons. It really depends also what kind of like the pipeline of the company, how big is that, and what is really required in terms of all these aspects based on the portfolio. I don't, Martin, I see you are there, so if you want to complement regarding the question.
Yeah, if you look at Europe and the structure in Europe, we have a European regulation on distribution, but this is a framework, and then there are local implementations that come with a lot of legacy. So being in the big markets always means that you have to follow the setup of the markets. You have to be part of the local boards for reimbursement, for health insurances and so on, to get your drug on the list. There are many reasons why you want to be in the local market, and being in Europe, please always consider that acting in the local language is essential. If you are going to apply for a license in the Netherlands, you do it in Dutch, and you don't do it in English. And these are just the examples where I see international companies sometimes being a little surprised, but that's the legacy of Europe. To be in the big markets, of course, is grants the advantage of having direct access. And in some markets, especially Italy, Spain, and Portugal, you're even forced to have local storage because these countries want to have a guaranteed supply of the drug within 24 hours throughout the entire country. So there are some other reasons why you want to be there. I have seen companies trying to set up pan-European networks. They sometimes get away with special regulations, but these companies are always in the area of rare orphan drugs. So only then you are able to kind of get away with a central approach. I have even one example where the company sells into France without having an own presence in France, but these are very, very specific cases. For the big European markets, please be prepared to have your own affiliate. And a very common setup is that for the smaller European markets, you have one common hub that serves them all. And this common hub is usually in a location which is also very pharma heavy. So for instance, right now with the European Medicine Agency moving to Amsterdam, we see a lot of this happening in the Netherlands.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I have one more question for.
Then I got a comment saying someone saying that a Swiss entity cannot have a European wholesale distribution authorization. I fully agree. So you need a point somewhere in the EU where you have a seat to get a license, but you do not have to have substantial operations at this point. And then if you have a Swiss company that has a European WDA somewhere, in most countries, you are allowed to sell directly under Swiss ownership and under this European license into these countries. Exceptions are the Nordics. Austria is struggling, Belgium is struggling. These are the known cases for today where I can say that it's an issue. But I also expect that with the finalization of this famous EU GMP Annex 21, that even these countries will then come up with decisions on how to handle this.
Brilliant. Thank you, Martin. So we have cleared this up as well. Now I see that we had this in the chat discussion. I have one question for Daniel, I think, which I thought was interesting, because we hear a lot about a global minimum tax and also coming from the US. Do you think this is going to have some implications on how you're going to structure your supply chain in Europe?
Well, actually, this push for a global minimum tax is not directly coming from the US. It has been on the OECD level, been discussed for years already. The difference now is that with the new president, there is also support from a US perspective for the introduction of a global minimum tax. I think what we heard a few weeks back is that they would be pushing for 21%, which would be familiar to a US concept. In the past, it was more discussed in the range of 10 to 15%. Considering the current financing needs for many countries in view of the pandemic, it is more likely than not that a global minimum tax will be introduced. People, however, don't expect that this global minimum tax will be around 21%, but rather in a range of 12 to 15%. And if that is the case, obviously, there is still a high tax efficiency if you would run the operations, for example, through a low tax jurisdiction like Switzerland, where you would be still about 15-16% lower compared to where you compared with Germany, France, Italy, or even the US. So there's still quite some planning opportunities in there, and I don't think that a minimum tax will change that to the extent it will be in a reasonable frame.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So in the interest of time, I do have one question here, which actually would have been for Negotium Bio, but maybe this is also something that Michael can speak to, which I found quite interesting. It's much around if you're working with a small biotech company with limited financial resources, how can a contract be structured for them to kind of keep a maximum flexibility? And I think Christoph and Mark, they also mentioned that there might also be options on how CDMOs can participate in the financial risks of those small innovative biotechs. Do you have any comments or opinion on this?
Yes, absolutely. I think some people prefer to buy a program as a full menu. They want to buy everything, so that they, at the end of the day, get their monoclonal in a vial, just a drug product. And they want to buy the complete program and want to get 2 or 3 bills only. In contrast to that, other companies prefer a heavily milestone structured program approach. And that's actually also our standard approach. We are flexible, we can do both ways, but the vast majority of our programs are heavily structured by milestones. And we have different service packages that we can customize to the requirements of our customers, and which will also be invoiced separately. So the customer can always take a break after certain milestones are reached and can then decide himself when they want to proceed. So that would be one way to tackle that point.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Lotus. I think we're already well over time. I just wanted to give you the chance again. Is there anything you wanted to add in particular to maybe to complement your presentations? A couple of quick words. If not, then we probably leave people with our networking options that we have as well. But just wanted to check if there are any final comments from your side.
I think just again to summarize, Switzerland is a great location for biopharma operations. It's just very important that when you plan your expansion to Europe or set up operations, that you apply a holistic approach. It's many stakeholders involved, regulatory requirements, operational needs, hiring needs, where you get the talent, and there's a big thought process involved there. But in the end, all of the clients and all of the groups we know that set up operations in Switzerland were quite happy.
I was very impressed by the numbers with regard to the talents which are available in Switzerland and in the Basel region. And Lonza decided 5 years ago to set up the drug product business unit in Basel, actually. And it was no problem. The group has now several hundreds of talent hired since then. Over the last 5 years, it was no problem in Basel. We are very happy with that decision.
That is good to hear. Thanks, Michael. This is what we're trying to tell people and companies as well. And yeah, obviously, our life science companies are thriving in this region. Yeah, but with that, I would like to thank you all very much. Michael, Daniel, Carlo, Martin. Mark already had to leave us, unfortunately. That's why he wasn't able to join us in the Q&A session again. For all of the participants, we do have a networking option as well. That is on the left-hand side, where you can use a one-on-one networking. And I think you can actually write directly to people as well. And I think if you scroll down in your event, there are also contact details. So that is basically applicable for all of us. If you have any more questions, I mean, we're more than happy to engage with you. Just drop us a note, and we'll be happy to discuss. Yeah, with this, I wish you all a very nice evening, afternoon, maybe morning for some of you. And yeah, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.